Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Graven. Our guest today is Betsy Pepine. She is a serial entrepreneur in real estate, owning several companies, including a real estate brokerage, a property management firm, and more. She's written her first book. It was published last September 2024. It's titled Breaking Boxes, Dismantling the Metaphorical Boxes That Bind Us. Betsy runs a robust real estate team that the Wall Street Journal has consistently recognized among the top producing in the United States. And she's endorsed by her mentor, the real estate mogul, Barbara Corcoran, who you might also know from Shark Tank. With her focus on culture, and we'll talk about that later in the episode, Betsy's brokerage, Pepine Realty, has been named as an Inc. 5000 fastest growing private companies in the US multiple times. Betsy has an economics degree from Duke University and an MBA from the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. So, Betsy, thanks for joining us here today. How are you?
Great. So happy to be here, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so it's great to have you here. I'm looking forward to talking about your book and culture at your firm. But first things first, the question we always get into here of all the different things you've done. What's your favorite mistake?
I've got so many to choose from. Probably my first big one when I started my company. I started my company, my brokerage, and I had no plan. I just knew that I wanted to not work for somebody else. And so I went out on my own and started working. And over the first maybe 2 years, slowly agents in the community asked if they could join me and basically hang their license with me, which was fine. But I was very clear. I don't offer anything. I'm working out of my house. I have my broker license. In Florida, you have to work under a broker for at least 2 years. So I was very, I think, transparent up front that is all I was offering. Well, before you know it, I've got about 6 to 8 agents working in my home, and it was getting rather chaotic. And I did have the wherewithal to hire an assistant for us. And so hired a woman who had worked with some of us in a previous job. And so it was great because she knew the industry, she knew us, and things were flowing very smoothly for the next probably year and a half. And by that time, I was really getting to a point of burnout. I hadn't had a vacation in a long time. And I'm a single mom, and my girls and I felt like needed to go away. And so I booked a cruise for us. And 2 days before the cruise, I sat down with the assistant because this was the first time I was leaving my company to anybody. And there was a lot of things I needed to make sure she could undertake, especially because this was at a time when internet on the cruise ships was not as great as it is today. And I was very worried that I was literally leaving my baby with her. And so we go to meet, and she's like, before you start, Betsy, I got to tell you something. And I said, you know what? And she said, I'm leaving.
Oh,
and
no.
I was like, oh my gosh, like stunned, didn't see it coming. And I was, like, please, tell me why. And so fortunately, she was very honest with me. And she said, there's 3 reasons. She said, we don't have a sense of family here. I don't see a path for growth for my career. And I don't see an opportunity to give back to the community. And I'm so glad she shared that with me because she was absolutely correct on all 3 of those things. I had been in a prior industry where the model was basically, and what I had come to believe is that you are selling your time in exchange for a job. Like that's how I was treated. And that's how I understood that world to be. And then you go home to your family, and then you go home to give back to the community. And those are things you do outside of your company.
Right.
So I kind of put my company in a box. That this is because it was modeled I was in the pharma industry in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so I didn't understand that, especially the younger population was looking for something more from their employer. And then the giving back I'd always done in my personal life. I'd never done that in my professional life. I did not have a growth path for her, because I didn't have a plan for this company. And it was unfair to her. So it really opened my eyes. It's like, I realized I either got to have a plan or not, and figure out what I want to do. So anyway, instead of packing that night for my cruise, I drove myself to Barnes and Noble. I checked out 4 books that I believed were the best ones on culture and leadership, and spent the nights on the cruise ship reading those books, devouring what those leaders did for their own companies. Came back, I got myself a coach, and he heard my predicament. He's like, Betsy, you got to go big or go home. And I'm like, I'm already home. I'm literally sitting in my garage. Let's go big. And so the mistake was, and I don't believe in really mistakes. I call them learnings in our company, but it was not having a plan. I had zero plan when I went out on my own. And I lost a great employee because of it. But looking back, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it really forced me to figure out, what did I want to be when I grow up? What did I want this company to be? And so I wish I had done that sooner. And when I counsel, people up and coming, I recommend a mentor, a coach. I think they're different. They fulfill different roles, but getting to that point sooner rather than later, I think really helps the trajectory of your company. And I could have expedited my growth had I gotten it, 5 years earlier, but I didn't. But I'm trying to make up for lost time. But that was a big mistake at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that story and hearing, your reasoning for why it's a favorite. I mean, that's a, theme on the podcast here of let's learn from those mistakes. Let's make the best out of that opportunity. I mean, on one level, I was wondering, did you have to postpone the cruise? Like, what was the short term keep the company going while you were away plan? Did the assistant stay on?
She did stay for 2 weeks. She was going to one of my biggest competitors, which really I really had a turmoil, because I wanted to release her because of the nature of our industry, but I just didn't feel like, then I would not have had to go on. I couldn't have gone. I didn't feel like I could go on the cruise. And it was important for my girls that we go, my daughters, for us to go on the cruise. And so I did let her stay the 2 weeks, and I did go on the cruise. Fortunately I could do that. And it was fine. It was fine. I quickly found another assistant and got the coach, and developed the mission and the core values and a real company,
Yeah. And I'm guessing, I mean, you have those other brokers, those other agents, they were looking out for things. It wasn't a mistake to let her work those 2 weeks, even though, it might have been a little not ideal. But,
right.
Well, I'm glad you got to, it sounded like that cruise, it sounded like it was necessary and meaningful for you. If you said you were reaching a point of burnout.
Right. Exactly. And my girls and I had not been on one in several years, and we needed to get away. So it was perfect.
Yeah. Do you remember offhand or what some or all of those 4 books were?
Yeah, I do, because somebody asked me that the other day. It was Entree Leadership with Dave Ramsey. It was the Zappos book. It was The Nordstrom Way. And then there was, I don't remember what the book is called, but it talks about the Ritz-Carlton, how they...
Okay. Service experience.
Yeah.
Okay. So did the 3 points that the outgoing assistant made about what was lacking, did that become a pretty direct playbook of repeating it back to you, creating a sense of family, creating paths for growth?
Yes.
I know philanthropy wise, you've done a lot to create opportunities to give back, but I'd be curious to, to hear if you could kind of talk through then what those steps were to try to put those elements in place, if not more, in terms of building a different culture.
So, we didn't have a mission statement. We didn't have core values. And so I created them the first go around myself. And they were truly like my core values for my life. And family was one of them. I mean, family was so important to me as a person. I just never connected the dots between, we could have a sense of family internally as well and within the company. And so that was just sadly an earth-shattering idea to me. I just had never crossed my mind before. So family is one of our core values. And we look at that as everyone in our company is a family. We are also very inclusive of their families.
Mhm.
Our clients and customers, we treat them as family. So we've really taken that term family and used it in a variety of different ways. Everyone's always invited. Like, you don't have to ask, can I bring so and so? Or, and you see kids in our office, you see pets in our office, you see grandparents in our office. It's
Mhm.
just a really nice feeling now. So that's how we address that one.
Yeah.
The giving back, I've always had a service heart. So I just brought that into the company. That was a very easy one for me to fix. And in fact, I loved it because then it freed up some of my personal time, because I was always doing it on my off time. And so creating these opportunities for all of my agents and staff was wonderful. And we ended up, that service was a core value. And several years later, we ended up changing that core value to impact, because the whole reason we do service is to have an impact.
Mhm.
And then when we made that core value switch from service to impact, we also created the nonprofit, because we really wanted to funnel our service into something really meaningful. And so we created a nonprofit that addresses the affordable housing issue in North Central Florida. And we build housing for cost burdened families in our area. We live in the highest cost burdened county in the state of Florida. And so we've been able to, with the support of the community, been able to help address that problem. So that's been really wonderful and rewarding for me personally,
Mhm.
and for my agents as well. And then in terms of career paths, yes, because what we've done is we love to cross train, so that it's almost like everybody has a vacation buddy internally. Agent wise, but we try to do that with staff too, so that there's another person in the company. They may not even be in their department, but they know how to do that role, so that they are helpful when somebody's away unexpectedly or expectedly.
Mhm.
But then we also have, it's been wonderful to see. So because we have the real estate brokerage, we have a property management company, we have a title company, we have a real estate school, we have the nonprofit. So sometimes it doesn't work out in one area. They recognize they're on the right bus, but not in the right seat. We don't
Mhm.
have to rehome them outside of the organization, because normally there's another role they can fill within
Ah,
the organization, because we have so many different entities under one roof. We
yeah.
also we've created, because we recognized in just being in the agent role, there's a cohort of people that would make great agents, but they cannot tolerate, for a variety of reasons, going from a W-2
Mm.
steady paycheck to a 1099, where income can be very variable, especially in the first 2 years.
Right.
So we created the salary agent role, and they
Oh.
can come on board as a salaried agent. And so it's wonderful, because I hated losing people that had showed such great potential,
Mhm.
but either they didn't have the confidence in themselves, or financially they really just couldn't do it. And we've created that role so that they can then transition from the team agent to a team agent. And then if they want at any point in time be an independent agent, they can. So there's a path there too.
Wow. I mean, to me, that sounds like a pattern of some good problem solving.
Yes,
My
I
engineer
thought
brain is
right.
hearing of like, well, we had some sort of problem. Here was the situation, and well, then here's what we developed to do
Yeah.
about it. Instead of just saying, well, that's the way it is, or being victim to that circumstance forever. I appreciate hearing those stories of that creativity of, like, in particular. I mean, how rare is that to have someone in a salaried agent
It's
position?
very uncommon in our industry.
Almost unheard of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I like to look at I love to see like gaps, and be able to fulfill that with a solution.
Yeah.
And even though I do make a lot of mistakes, I feel like I'm very good at, one, making mistakes, but also learning from them.
Hmm.
And I do believe that's how you advance. The more mistakes you make, because that's how you learn. I do not learn staying static and
Yeah.
being comfortable. And so unless I'm trying new things and learning from them, I don't feel like I'm growing.
Yeah. Yeah. So then with the brokerage firm, I mean, how many people do you have working for you now? I'm sure you very quickly had to get out of the garage into a real office. Kind of paint a picture. I'm curious how much you grew beyond that point or continue to grow.
We're right now we're probably at about 50. Right before COVID, we were at 75.
Mhm.
We kind of ebb and flow with, like, some agents get into the business because of the market. Sadly, I don't think that's the reason you should get into real estate at all.
Yeah.
But so we kind of ebb and flow with the market. I'd say our sweet spot is probably 75. Um, I I feel like when we were at 75, I was starting to not know people's names, and that bothered me,
Mhm.
and just personally. So I feel like that's probably the sweet spot.
Yeah. So what is in your view the best reason to get into real estate? Is it you mentioned earlier having a service heart, and that could mean nonprofit service, but in general, like I think when I've bought homes, I think the best agents have a great service orientation, and of course they're making money in the process.
Yeah, I mean, nurses and teachers and law enforcement, they make the best agents because
Oh.
they truly have a heart of gold, or they're in it for the right reasons. You
Mhm.
don't have to love houses. In fact, I tell people, if you're getting into real estate because you love houses, don't, because you'll become disillusioned very quickly.
Mhm.
The houses that you
Yeah.
see online, that's not how people live and
Right.
on the television shows. And you're seeing, you'll see 50, 60 houses a week. It gets old very quickly. So that's not really a great reason to get into real estate. If you like helping people, if you like solving problems, and the biggest one is, and I don't think agents understand this going in, and I certainly didn't, but buying a house is a life event. To me, a life event is anything you're going to remember in 5 years. You ask anybody
Yeah.
what houses they've owned, they can list them all.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's a life event. But then you ask them, why did they buy a house? It is almost always precipitated by another life event, a
Yeah.
job,
Hmm.
a job loss, a new birth, a death, a promotion. There's always some life event that is designating this need to buy a house. So you're dealing with, if you're representing the seller, for example, you're dealing with two life events on their side. Then you're negotiating with the buyer who is also facing two life events.
Yeah.
So four life events in every transaction is incredibly stressful for those
Mhm.
individuals. So your real role is to reduce the stress.
Yeah.
Truly,
Hmm.
you are in customer service. You're trying to take the stress off of this family or person and make it a smooth transition. That is the goal of a real estate agent, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah. Well, that's nicely put. When it comes to culture, you've started these other companies. Are you aiming for those same elements of culture and values to be pretty consistent across the different companies, or are some of them by nature a little bit different?
You know, they are all under one roof. We
Hmm.
have one large company meeting every Tuesday. Everyone's in the meeting. So we treat it as we treat it
Okay.
as one large company.
Okay.
So yes, so all of the values are the same. The
Hmm.
mission statements are a little bit different, but the core values are the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then there's sharing and learning across those
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
segments of the business, I
Yeah.
guess.
And I
Would be
mean,
a better way
it's
to
like
put
a family of companies. For the most part, it's very similar logos, very similar, colors, very similar exterior facing marketing.
it. Hmm.
Um, so there's a lot of cohesion.
Yeah. Okay. And then I know when you talked before, you had shared one thing with me about your culture. I wanted to bring up again when you talked about you being good at learning from mistakes. Tell us about the mistakes that are shared
Oh,
in that
yeah,
weekly
yeah,
meeting.
yeah. So every Tuesday, it's truly my favorite part of the meeting, and I think it's
Yeah.
become a lot of agents' favorite part. We have a learnings, and so people share what other companies may view as mistakes with the entire team, and these are not small mistakes. These are, I mean, especially when you're a new agent, you may have put a buyer's escrow in jeopardy, and that's thousands of dollars. And you may have had to buy somebody a washer and a dryer because you're a new agent and you forgot to put it in the contract. These aren't small things.
Right.
And I think in some settings, you could be embarrassed by that and you would want to hide from that.
Mm-hmm.
But we bring it out because we want everyone to learn from that. So they're not making that, they're going to make their own mistakes, but we're not all going to make that one mistake. So it really expedites the growth, and it minimizes the number of mistakes each agent makes. So I think they come excited because it's like, let me see what else I can learn from these other agents so I don't make these mistakes myself.
Right.
So it really is. And we all call them learnings, and there may even be a slight competition on who can bring the best one that week. It's really a positive thing. And I truly love it and believe that it has really helped the agents grow in a way that you can't have if you're a solo agent working off by yourself.
Yeah. And that reminds me of, a similar story in practice I had heard when Jim McCann was a guest here. He's the founder and now chairman of 1-800-Flowers and all of their, I guess you might, similar way, family of businesses. And he shared how, like you said, they try to make it a positive of, the customer service mistake or, even trying to be, lighthearted about it in a way, like not making fun of, but like sometimes like you say, well, that was a disaster. That was funny. Nobody really got hurt, but he talked about the stress of if you've ordered flowers for a major life event and they are late, that is a non-trivial thing for people to be upset about.
Yeah.
So I love hearing your take on that, and I want to ask you as a leader. I've seen in different settings where even if we're trying to have a blame-free, positive culture about mistakes, a lot of times people still put a lot on themselves. They might be harder on themselves than you or somebody else might be on them. So I'm wondering, or I'm curious, when you think about just coping with how people might feel about making a mistake or being involved in a mistake, as much as you try to make it a positive, that can be hard for people to be comfortable with still.
Yeah, especially in this role, because a lot of people have come from more, I don't want to say stable, but more predictable environments. There are so many different moving parts in a transaction. So it's just, the more my staff and I can normalize it for them, the more they let themselves off the hook. I mean, it's not like we're saying, go make a ton of mistakes by any means. And in fact, we do have a process that, we do have, the three strikes and you're out. If we truly believe you're being careless and you're not really thinking, that's different. But we normalize it as best we can because some of the top agents have made some and myself included. And I go into that meeting and I tell everybody, even in the role that I'm in now, the mistakes that I make even to this day, because we're human and we will make them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's really powerful, or I've experienced how powerful it is when, co-founder or CEO or somebody in a leadership position leads by example that way. And I agree with you. There's gray area where maybe somebody just isn't suited for a certain job that requires an attention to detail. And maybe they're a good person, they're a good employee. Maybe you find a different role, for them. There are different things you can do. But one thing I heard you saying basically was, being open about these mistakes and learning from them reduces the amount of mistakes that are happening. Where I've heard leaders, there are still people, generally not the guests on this podcast, but there are people out there still that are in the camp of saying, like, well, I have to punish mistakes, otherwise people will just make more. And I think, like you were saying, I think we're on the side of this where you'd say, well, when you punish people unfairly, then they hide and cover up things, and then more mistakes happen. We just don't know about them. We can't learn about them. I'll get off my soapbox there. But, I believe that too.
Right. The other thing I do for myself, and I encourage my agents and staff to do this, is whenever I'm in a situation that I don't want to find myself in again, now it could be a mistake or just something I don't want to find myself in again, I say to myself, Betsy, what could you have done
Mm-hmm.
so that you're not here? There's always something. Now, I'm not saying sometimes it's not even our fault, but there is something we could have done that would have made this situation not come to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that really helps, because that's the goal, is how do I not find myself in the same situation again? So what systems and processes or decision-making skills do I need so that this doesn't replicate itself?
Yeah. Do you use checklists for some of the,
Oh yeah.
for
We're
this
big into
fairly,
checklists.
I'm sorry.
We're big into checklists.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's a great way to try to prevent mistakes.
Yeah.
So again, I'm totally with you of, yeah, if we learn from mistakes, more mistakes isn't more better. I know that was a mistake to say it.
Yeah, yeah.
Grammatically, we don't,
Right.
I mean, it doesn't mean being flippant or careless.
Right.
To acknowledge we're human, we make mistakes. Let's try to prevent them.
Right.
And then when they do happen, we can learn from them.
Right.
I think that's the perfect.
For me, it's not even just fixing the mistake at hand. It's how do we prevent this in the future? Because
Exactly.
I think a lot of people just say, well, let me just fix this. But then
Right.
they don't take that extra step and say, wait a minute, how do I systematize my process so that this will never happen to me again?
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I know you studied finance. You sound like an engineer. You know, we're talking through. There's some engineer mindset that I'm not saying. I'm not saying trying to say engineers are the only ones who can think that way.
Yeah.
I love hearing when you talk about process and systems, and that can go a long way to helping us out and preventing issues. So let's talk about the book. I mean, again, we're joined by Betsy Pepine. Her book is titled "Breaking Boxes: Dismantling the Metaphorical Boxes That Bind Us." The title, I think, there's a deep meaning, what you're writing about. But when I think of moving in the life events, one of the most traumatic things is getting rid of the boxes.
Well, and I even talk about that in my book. Boxes are meant to be temporary, but we forget. And it's like the box and this happens all the time. You go to list a house and there's these boxes in the attic or a basement, if you're in the north, they just go from house to house. They never get opened. It's like, no, the purpose of the box is temporary storage to keep things safe. And then you flatten them and put them out on the curb for garbage pickup day.
Right.
But it's the same with the metaphorical boxes.
Yeah.
Boxes can keep us safe at some times, but most boxes are meant to be temporary, and we should be moving out of them. And if you're like me, I had the habit of overstaying my welcome in some boxes that no longer serve me. And so the book is about boxes that we find ourselves in, whether it's through the expectations and opinions of our family of origin, of our peers, of our industry, of our gender, of our roles in life, the mom, the dad, the aunt, the uncle, the whatever role you're playing, all those different kinds of boxes, and boxes we put ourselves in, not even boxes that other people put us in, but we put ourselves in boxes, and how limiting that can be.
Yeah.
Mainly because, like a box, in fact, when I tell the story of when my daughter, we were moving, and they packed up everything and they labeled the one box kitchen. And then we got to our new house, and we were unpacking, and I asked my daughter, hey, what's in that box? She's like, oh, that's just kitchen stuff. It's like you lump everything in that box as this label, and you stop seeing the nuances of what's inside the minute you slap a label on somebody or something.
Yeah. And those labels could be, those boxes are the labels, the roles that we would say define us. But so let's say, job title is one of those boxes, you might say. And somebody, I don't know if you can think of an example. Yeah, I'm thinking through where that box was limiting because somebody couldn't see their potential beyond the current box. Not that we're looking for a bigger box, a better box, or that. Tell us more about that box going from being helpful, maybe something that we take pride in, where now it's holding us back or it's limiting us. How do we dismantle the box?
Well, for me, the first step, and it's been a growth, and I'm not an expert by any means, but the first thing is you have to know you're in a box. And to know you're in a box means it means to know you have options outside of the box.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first step. But once you have the awareness of being in a box that no longer serves you, identify why are you staying. And most of the time, if we're honest with ourselves, the reason why we're staying is fear-based. So
Mm-hmm.
we either fear failure, change, just change
Mm-hmm.
in general, or some kind of loss. And so I write it down. I'm a visual learner, so I like to write things down. And when I write things down, things look less scary and more
Mm-hmm.
um, doable, more, I don't know, I'm just not as threatened by it, because I feel like when things stay in my mind, that can feel very, very scary. But the minute I write it down, it's like, oh, okay, that doesn't seem so bad. So for fear of failure, though, I address that to me is a box. I threw that box out long ago. It's a mental construct. I've got two dogs sitting right beside me here. They're not worried about if they're going to fail chasing the cat today. That is totally a human judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And I truly believe what I may deem as failure in my eyes, somebody else in this world would love that opportunity,
Yeah.
right? And so it's not failure. And for me, worst case is if I feel myself being resistant, it's like, okay, if this doesn't go the way I want, worst case scenario is I have to pivot and I learned something great
Mm-hmm.
that I can take with me for the rest of my life. That's worst case scenario. I
Right.
can I can deal with that, right? So that's fear of failure, fear of change. That's a muscle. To me, that's just muscle memory. The more you put yourself in uncomfortable situations, unpredictable situations, the better you are with change, knowing that you are going to be fine,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of what's going on around you.
Yeah.
So even if it's like something I do every morning, I wake up, I take an ice cold shower. That may be the only thing today that's going to put me outside my comfort zone. But it really builds up. It's amazing the strength even just one simple exercise like that does, because
Mm-hmm.
you build this resilience and you understand that you're going to be fine with change. And then the fear of loss, it's either usually loss of status, social
Mm-hmm.
connection, or financial loss.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, fear of status is an ego issue. Just put the
Mm-hmm.
ego on your shelf and go move forward. Don't let that impact your decision. Fear of social connection, I think, is a real one. When you move the chess pieces, the game is shifted, and people are going to move in and out of your life when you move, and that's okay. That's a necessary ending. It doesn't mean it's bad. It means the relationship, the dynamic is complete. It's served its value for both of you, and you move on. So shore up your where you're going. Shore up the people in your next phase of your life. If you're talking about the job promotion, get mentors and people who are there, so that when you do lose some folks in your social connection, you have other ones to lift you up.
Yeah.
And then the last one, the fear of financial loss, that's a real one, especially I see that in our industry where people really want to make that jump and can't. And that's again why I created the salary agent position. But with the
Mm-hmm.
gig economy and the internet, like that wasn't available when I first got into real estate. But
Yeah.
nowadays there's so many opportunities for people to create these secondary sources of income to help them as they, get on their not right, but on the new path, that I think that's becoming a less of a fear for people.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask, you talk about coaches and mentors. How did you meet Barbara Corcoran?
I met her because just coincidentally, I was buying my television and print media. I'm sorry, television and radio media through an agency in New York. And the gentleman there knew her and asked me if I wanted her as my mentor. Absolutely.
Yeah.
She's incredible. Her whole first career was in real estate. She built her brokerage up twice. She was a single mom. We had so many parallels.
Oh,
So I really admire her. She's now, I think, 76 and just going strong. And so it's been a really rewarding thing for me in my life.
well, that's great. So, I mean, our most recent episode here, you have a connection to someone who's been on is she still on Shark Tank? I know she was there from the beginning.
Yeah.
She's been one of
Season 16 or 17,
I
isn't
haven't
she now?
watched the show as much in a while, but the very first episode of this podcast, Kevin Harrington, who was on the first season
Yeah.
with Barbara, he I don't know why he was only on the show the first season. He was credited as being love it or hate it, the inventor of the 30-minute infomercial.
Oh, wow.
A
Wow.
different background than
Yeah.
Barbara's, but I think from the beginning to talking with you, I love hearing these patterns of successful entrepreneurs and business owners like yourself who can recognize, hey, we didn't get to where we were by being perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can't. I don't think that's possible. I think truly, I think the most successful people in life are the ones that have failed the most.
Mm-hmm. And learn how to bounce back from
Correct.
it.
Correct. Right.
Yeah. And, unfortunately not everybody does that, but I appreciate, you and others shining a light on that example and reminding people, don't be too hard on yourselves, because sadly, sometimes people are in a job where they're not getting that kind of support. They're not working for a boss who shares those mindsets or the culture that people like yourself have. So I really appreciate hearing it when I do.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it would be good to hear a little bit, as I'd mentioned, your philanthropy initiatives, and I know there are some themes and causes that are important to you. If you can tell us a little bit about Pepine Gives and some of the things you support.
So Pepine Gives is our 501c3. It's a nonprofit. We raise money through a variety of different ways: grants, online giving. We hold community events. We've got a huge golf tournament every year. We've got a huge pickleball tournament every year to raise money. And then we have a partnership, an alliance with Habitat for Humanity, and we build homes with them every year. We invite the community to come out because we want everyone to participate on the build days. And so it's not just restricted to our agents and staff. And what I love about Habitat, which a lot of people don't realize, is it's truly a hand up, not a handout. We don't give these homes away by any means. They actually pay appraised value, but Habitat is so good about knowing what every single program that's out there that's available for cost burden families, so they can get so much assistance with the purchase, but they're paying appraised value. They get very low interest rate loans. We really tee them up for success. They have to take educational classes in not only home financing, but also home maintenance.
Yeah.
So, because we don't want to have to foreclose on them. That would be the worst thing to do.
Right.
And so it's really just a wonderful program. So we do that. We're going to be expanding and doing also home repair and safety. So for cost burden families where they may have come up with handicap accessibility issues or get hit by a hurricane and they don't need to move, but they need it. They need major repairs done to their homes. So we're going to be expanding our program to accompany that cohort of cost burden families as well. We also do other volunteer initiatives in the community. We ask our agents and staff what they're passionate about. The large focus is on housing, because that's where we live and breathe every day. But we also try to address the needs of the people in our organization. So if, for example, we had somebody very passionate about the equestrian community, and so we went and painted horse stalls for there's a horse rescue. So we do that. We do a lot of pet rescue. We do a lot with homelessness and feeding the homeless. So whatever our agents bring to us, we're very open to helping those other initiatives that we may not even be aware of.
Yeah. And it says in your bio, one other thing that a couple of guests have brought up on the show is, it's either a business mistake or societal mistake to make it difficult for people released from prison to get back into jobs.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about, that issue in particular, working with women.
Yeah. So that's always been a interest of mine. I truly feel like, and maybe in a past life, I was in jail because I have always had this passion and
Yeah.
interest in prison and
Mhm.
being released, and how we can help them. And these women, and it was eye opening to me because I started out thinking, oh, I want to teach them money's not money making, but money saving skills.
Mhm.
What I quickly realized is they have no money.
Yeah.
They leave prison basically with no money, and
Mhm.
then it's such a hardship because a lot of them have lost the support of their family. They live in halfway houses. They have they don't have cars, so to get I didn't realize how all this is intertwined, but you
Right.
need a car well, especially in a city like ours where we don't have this strong public transportation. So you need a car to get to work. So
Mhm.
it's just like, it's so convoluted. So
Right.
I started out teaching financial peace to them, which is a Dave Ramsey course, which I absolutely love and teaches you debt free living. But we can't, and he's like, has all these steps, and we really couldn't get past a certain number of steps because they just they can't fathom too far ahead of them. So I still do that, but then I also try to teach them life skills. Like, how do you build a life? That's not really taught. And what are your 6 to 8 life pillars that are going to keep you afloat? So that, because at any one time, one of your life pillars is not going great. And
Mhm.
if you're, I was like, and in fact, I had a really real example of that when I was in my 30s. I had 3 life pillars. It was my marriage, my kids, and my job. And in
Mhm.
a very short period of time, I was suddenly single, and my job, they experienced a corporate layoff. So
Mhm.
2 of my 3 pillars were gone. And when you're sitting on a 3-legged stool and 2 of your legs go out, you
Yeah.
land on the floor.
Yeah.
So I understand what happens when you don't have a solid foundation. And so now my focus is more on how do we build a life, and talk to me about your life pillars and what's important to you. Health, finances, career, friends and family, a hobby, spirituality, giving back, and trying to let them see the different facets of a life, and how can we build each of those up so that when the one leg is not acting the way you want it to, you're still going to be okay and stay afloat.
Mhm. Wow.
So
Well, Betsy, thank you for all of the work you do there, and thank you for everything you shared with us here today. I think it's really inspiring and a lot of practical advice, and I appreciate you sharing that with all of us here today. So, again, Betsy Pepine has been our guest today. Her book is titled Breaking Boxes, Dismantling the Metaphorical Boxes That Bind Us. You can go buy it now, and I'll make sure there are links to Betsy's website and LinkedIn profile in the show notes. BetsyPepine.com is the website. Betsy, thank you so much for taking time and being with us today.
thank you, Mark.